Hi, I'm Carl Weber. Welcome to Video Aided Instructions English Grammar Series. This is the Sentence Complements program. Do you like compliments? Most people do. Gee, I like what you've done with this apartment. Your hair looks good today. Great shoes. Well, the kinds of compliments we'll be talking about in this program are a little different. The kind of compliments I just talked about are spelled C-O-M-P-L-I-M-E-N-T-S. The compliments we'll be talking about in this program use the letter E in place of the letter I. And that word complement is connected with the verb complete. To complete something is to finish it or to round it out. And a sentence complement is a word or a group of words that completes the thought begun by the subject and the verb in a sentence. We've been talking in other programs in this series about how a sentence is a bit like a machine made up of various parts. The sentence complement is one of the important kinds of parts that go to make up a sentence, and it's important that you understand how to use sentence complements in order to express your meaning clearly and accurately. In this program, we'll talk about the different kinds of sentence complements and give you some basic rules for using them correctly in English sentences. Before we can talk directly about sentence complements, we need to talk about three kinds of verbs in English. As you'll see, each of these three kinds of verbs is related to a particular type of sentence complement. The three main kinds of verbs in English are transitive verbs, intransitive verbs, and linking verbs. Let's take a look at each. A transitive verb expresses action that passes from the subject of the verb to an object of the verb. As you recall, a verb is a word that expresses action or state of being. A transitive verb is always an action verb. The subject of the verb is the person or thing that does the action of the verb. The object of a transitive verb receives the action. Take a look at this sentence as an example. Omar typed the letter. Now, what's the verb in this sentence? The verb is the word typed. What's the subject of the verb typed? That is, who or what did the typing? The answer is Omar. So Omar is the subject, typed is the verb. Now, this is a transitive verb because it has an object, that is, something that receives the action of the verb. Who or what receives the action of the typing in this sentence? The answer is letter. The word letter is a noun which is receiving the action of the verb typed, and therefore it's the object of the verb. Because the verb typed has an object which receives the action, we refer to typed as a transitive verb. Here's another example. Lorraine swam 20 laps. What's the verb in this sentence? The verb is swam. What's the subject of the verb swam? That is, who or what did the swimming? The answer, Lorraine. Lorraine swam. Now, what did Lorraine swim? That is, what receives the action of the verb swam in this sentence? The answer is laps. Laps is a noun which receives the action of the verb swam. It tells us what Lorraine swam. So laps is the object of the verb swam, and therefore, in this sentence, swam is a transitive verb, because only a transitive verb expresses action that passes from the subject of the verb to an object. Now, the second type of verb is an intransitive verb. As you may know, the prefix in English usually means not. It takes the meaning of the word and reverses it or negates it. So you might be able to guess that an intransitive verb is a verb that is not transitive, and that's exactly right. Here's the definition. An intransitive verb expresses action that does not have an object. We saw a moment ago that a transitive verb has an object which receives the action of the verb. An intransitive verb doesn't have such an object. Take a look at this sentence. Elliot slept. This is a short sentence, only 2 words, but it is a complete sentence. It has a subject and a verb, and it expresses a complete thought. In this sentence, the verb is slept, and the subject is Elliot. And the verb does not have any object. It expresses a complete thought without having an object. We don't need to ask, what did Elliot sleep? Because the meaning is complete without any object. Elliot slept, that tells us exactly what happened. It's perfectly clear, and it doesn't sound incomplete. So slept in this sentence is an intransitive verb. It has no object, and it doesn't need one. Here's another example. Jacques laughed. Again, it's a very short sentence, but it is complete. It contains a subject and a verb. The verb is laughed. The subject is Jacques. Jacques is the one doing the laughing. And there is no object. The sentence doesn't tell us what Jacques laughed. He simply laughed. That's a complete thought, a complete idea in itself, and no object is needed. Once again, we're dealing with an intransitive verb in this sentence. The third type of verb is a linking verb. A linking verb expresses a state of being. It links the subject to another word in the sentence. Remember that our definition of verb explains that a verb is a word that expresses an action or a state of being. Both transitive and intransitive verbs express actions. A linking verb expresses a state of being. Rather than telling us what the subject does, it tells us what the subject is. The most common linking verb is be, and the word be in many different forms is found in lots of sentences. Some other common linking verbs are act, appear, seem, taste, and turn. And there are quite a few others. You can recognize a linking verb by the fact that what follows the linking verb and the subject of the linking verb are in some way the same. The linking verb is called a linking verb because it links those two things and in some way equates them or tells us that they are one and the same thing. Here are a couple of examples. Karim is a school teacher. We said a moment ago that the verb to be is the most common linking verb. Here's an example of a form of the verb to be. The verb is. What's the subject of the verb is? Karim. Karim is the one who is. And following the verb is, we're told exactly what Karim is. A teacher, or specifically a school teacher. So in this case, the subject Karim is being linked by the linking verb is to the word teacher. Karim is teacher. And the words a school are giving a little more information about what kind of teacher. Notice that is operating here as a linking verb because it's linking Karim and teacher. It's telling us that Karim and teacher are in some way the same thing. And in fact, they are. That's what Karim is. So the two things are being linked or equated to one another. And that's how a linking verb works. As I've said, the verb to be is the most common linking verb, but there are a number of others. Here's an example. Leanna looked nervous. What's the verb in this sentence? The verb is looked. The subject is Leanna. That tells us who looked. And the word that follows looked is the word nervous. And this is being linked to Leanna by the linking verb looked. We can tell that in this sentence, looked is operating as a linking verb because Leanna and the word that follows, nervous, are being linked or equated with one another. We're being told that Leanna and nervous are in some way the same thing. And in fact, we know that Leanna is nervous. Notice that in this case, the verb looked, which is a linking verb in this sentence, is being used to mean almost the same as the verb to be. When we say that Leanna looked nervous, we're saying in a way that Leanna is or was nervous. So the verb looked is being used as a linking verb in a way that's similar to the way the verb to be is used. We're being told that Leanna and nervous are linked or equated in some way. And that's why looked is being used in this sentence as a linking verb. One more example. Edgardo felt optimistic. In this sentence, the verb is felt, and the subject is Edgardo. And what did Edgardo feel? He felt optimistic. Once again, felt is being used as a linking verb in this sentence because Edgardo and optimistic are being linked. They are being equated. When we say that Edgardo felt optimistic, that's Almost the same thing as saying he was optimistic. It's just putting a slightly different meaning on it. So in this sentence, felt is being used as a linking verb, and what comes before and after the linking verb, those two things are being equated or being made to appear the same. Edgardo and optimistic go together, and that's why felt is considered a linking verb in this sentence. These then are the three kinds of verbs: transitive verbs, intransitive verbs, and linking verbs. And as you'll see in a moment, it's important to understand the difference in order to understand how sentence complements are used. Notice that some verbs can be used as more than one kind of verb. In other words, the very same verb word can be used in a transitive way or an intransitive way, or perhaps as a linking verb. Take a look at these examples. Miguel ran. Here's a short sentence which expresses a complete thought in itself. The verb is ran, the subject is Miguel. And when we read this sentence, we understand Miguel ran. Perhaps he's a runner on the track team and went out running this morning. And we could say, well, Miguel ran. This could be a complete sentence. And in this case, the verb ran is being used as what kind of verb? Transitive, intransitive, or linking? In this case, ran is being used as an intransitive verb. Remember that an intransitive verb doesn't have any object. The action simply stops with the verb ran, and the action does not pass on to an object that follows the verb. Miguel ran, a complete sentence in itself, and ran is an intransitive verb. But now compare it to this sentence. Jorge ran the car wash. Here we have the same verb, ran, but it's used in a very different way than in the previous sentence. In the previous sentence, we saw that the verb ran had no object. Miguel ran, and that was the end of the sentence. In this case, the verb ran does have an object. The action of the verb ran is being passed on to something which is receiving that action, namely the car wash. That is what Jorge ran. So in this sentence, the verb ran, this very same verb that we saw a moment ago being used as an intransitive verb, is being used as a transitive verb, a verb that has an object which receives the action of the verb. So these two sentences show us that the same verb can sometimes be used as either a transitive verb or an intransitive verb. Here's another example of how the role played by the same verb may change from one sentence to the next. Anna grew tomatoes. In this sentence, the verb is grew. The subject is Anna. Now, what did Anna grow? Is there an object to the verb grew? Yes, there is. She grew tomatoes. So the noun tomatoes is the object of the verb grew. It receives the action of the verb. Therefore, what kind of verb is grew in this sentence? It's a transitive verb, because remember, only transitive verbs pass the action along to an object. Compare that with this sentence. Tova grew hungry. Here we have the same verb, grew, but the meaning is a little different, and the structure of the sentence is different. In this case, the verb grew doesn't have an object. This word hungry doesn't tell us a thing that Tova grew, the way Anna grew tomatoes. Hungry isn't a noun, and it doesn't name some object which receives the action of the verb grew. Instead, it tells us what Tova was. Therefore, what kind of verb is grew? In this case, grew is being used as a linking verb. The two words Tova and hungry are being linked or equated. We're being told, in effect, that Tova was hungry. She grew hungry, that is, she got to be hungry over time, but in effect, the two things are being equated with one another. Tova was hungry. That's another way of saying almost the same thing as Tova grew hungry. So in this particular example, the verb grew is being used as a linking verb. It is linking Tova and hungry. The two things are being equated with one another. Hungry is not the object of the action. It's not receiving the action in the way the tomatoes received the action of growing in the sentence about Anna. Instead, grew is being used as a linking verb, and Tova and hungry are being equated with one another. Once again, notice that the very same verb can be used with different meanings to play a different role in a sentence. So the same verb may be a transitive verb or an intransitive verb or a linking verb. You can't tell what type of verb a verb is just by looking at the verb in isolation. Instead, you have to look at it in the context of the sentence and understand how it's being used and how it relates to the words nearby. In your study guide, we've provided an exercise which will enable you to test your understanding of these concepts. In this exercise, your job is to look at the underlined verb in each sentence and decide whether it's being used as a transitive verb, an intransitive verb, or a linking verb. Let's start with the first sentence. The author Earl Stanley Gardner wrote a number of books using the pen name A.A. Fair. Now in this sentence, the verb wrote is underlined. In order to determine whether it's a transitive verb, an intransitive verb, or a linking verb, you need to decide whether it's a verb of action or a verb of being. And if it's a verb of action, whether there is something in the sentence which receives the action of the verb. Well, in this case, wrote is being used as a verb of action. It is telling us something that the author Earl Stanley Gardner did. And is there anything in the sentence which receives the action of the verb wrote? That is, does the sentence tell us something that Earl Stanley Gardner wrote? The answer is yes. There is something that receives the action of the verb in this sentence. It's the word number. Or to give the entire phrase, it's a number of books. That's what he wrote. He wrote a number of books. And therefore, there is an object that's receiving the action of the verb. The verb wrote, its action flows through to a number of books. Therefore, wrote is being used as a transitive verb. Because remember, only a transitive verb has an object which follows it, which receives the action of the verb. Let's look at the next example. Upon closer examination, several spokes of the bicycle's rear wheel appeared broken. In this sentence, the verb appeared is underlined. Let's begin by asking, what's the subject of the verb appeared? The answer is the word spokes. Don't be misled by the fact that several words come between the word spokes and the word appeared. It's the spokes that appeared broken. What kind of spokes? The spokes of the bicycle's rear wheel. So that prepositional phrase, of the bicycle's rear wheel, simply modifies or gives more information about the spokes. That's not where the actual subject of the verb appears. The subject is spokes. So the spokes appeared broken. Now, in this case, is appeared being used as a verb of action or a verb of being? Well, it's being used as a verb of being because it's not telling us something that the spokes did, it's telling us something that the spokes were. Namely, they were broken. The word appeared is being used almost as the equivalent of the verb to be, and the two things are being linked. The spokes, which is the subject of the verb appeared, and the word broken, which comes after the verb, those two things are being linked, and we're being told that the spokes were broken. What comes before and after the verb are being equated in this sentence, so appeared is being used as a linking verb. Our next example. Ivan and Sasha danced together until 2 o'clock, when the band finally stopped playing. Now in this sentence, the word danced is underlined, so that's the verb that we want to focus on. What's the subject of the verb danced? The answer is Ivan and Sasha. Remember that the subject of a verb may be compound. That is, it may be two nouns that are joined by a word like and. So Ivan and Sasha are the subject of the verb danced. Now, does the verb danced here have an object which receives the action of the dancing? That is, are we being told something that Ivan and Sasha danced? Not in this sentence. We're being told that they danced together. That tells us how they danced. And we're being told that they danced together until 2 o'clock, which is a little more information about how they danced. The word together is an adverb because it gives more information about or modifies the verb danced. It tells us how they danced. And until 2 o'clock is a prepositional phrase that also gives us more information about how they danced. Neither one, however, is an object, and neither one is being linked to Ivan and Sasha. Neither one tells us what Ivan and Sasha were. Therefore, the verb danced, in this case, doesn't have an object, and it's not being used as a linking verb. It is an intransitive verb. Remember that an intransitive verb is a verb of action that doesn't have an object receiving the action, and that's the case in this sentence. The verb danced is being used here as an intransitive verb. Notice, by the way, that the verb danced can be used as a transitive verb. You could imagine a sentence in which there is an object receiving the action of the verb danced. For example, you could say, Ivan and Sasha danced the polka. In that sentence, the word polka would be receiving the action of the verb danced. It would be telling us what they danced. And we would have transformed the verb danced from an intransitive verb to a transitive verb, because there would be an object receiving the action of the verb. There is no such object in this sentence, and therefore the correct answer for this sentence in your exercise is intransitive. The next sentence. Even by modern engineering standards, the pyramids of Egypt remain an incredible achievement. The verb remain is underlined. What's the subject of the verb remain? What remain an incredible achievement? The answer is pyramids. Once again, the fact that some other words come between the subject and the verb shouldn't confuse you. It's not Egypt that remains an incredible achievement. It's the pyramids that remain an incredible achievement. Now, what about the words that follow remain? How do those relate back to the verb? Are they the object of the verb? That is, do they receive the action of the verb, or do they play some other role? Well, in this case, remain is not a verb of action, but rather a verb of being, and therefore you can probably anticipate that it's being used as a linking verb, because that's how verbs of being are used. And sure enough, what follows the verb remain is an incredible achievement. These words explain what the pyramids of Egypt are. They are an incredible achievement. So what comes before and after the verb in this sentence, those two things are being equated. We're being told that they are the same as one another. And that makes the verb remain a linking verb. Our next example. Working with extreme care, the bomb squad removed the suspicious package. In this sentence, the verb removed has been underlined, and the subject of the verb is the bomb squad, or specifically the word squad. Now, what did the bomb squad remove? Is there an object for the action of this verb? Yes, there is. The object is the noun package, or to give the complete phrase, the suspicious package. So the package is receiving the action of the verb removed. It's telling us what they removed, and therefore package is the object of the transitive verb in this sentence. So for this last example in the exercise, the verb is being used as a transitive verb. Did you get all 5 of these questions right? I hope so. Let's turn now to lesson 2.